Everyone in the restaurant pretended not to notice the billionaire CEO's deaf twins struggling to be understood, until a quiet waitress signed one simple word that changed their lives forever. Hello. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Ms. Love Stories channel, the place where love, drama, and unforgettable moments come alive. I'm so thrilled you're here, ready to dive into stories that will make your heart race, bring tears, and leave you believing in the power of love. Before we begin, I want to get to know all of you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because in the next video, I'll give a special shout out to some of you amazing viewers from around the world. I can't wait to see how far our love story family reaches. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a single emotional journey. Get ready to feel, laugh, cry, and fall in love all over again. Because every story we share here is for you. Today's shout out goes to Sheila, also to Lori Mora from Mount Shasha, California, John from Ireland, Frederick from South Haven, Mississippi, and Christmas from Nashville, Tennessee. Now, the story begins. Rose. The rain outside the city's tallest glass towers fell in thin silver lines, sliding down the windows like silent tears. Inside the 32nd floor of McCrae Global Industries, everything was quiet except for the steady ticking of a clock. McCrae sat behind his massive desk, staring at a photograph. In the picture were two small children, a boy and a girl, both smiling, both identical, both raising their tiny hands in a strange but beautiful gesture. Sign language. McCrae's fingers tightened around the photo frame. For the entire world, McCrae was a legend. A billionaire CEO whose technology empire stretched across continents. A man whose decisions could move markets and reshape cities. But right now, none of that mattered. Because the only two people who mattered most in his life couldn't hear him. Across the room, the door opened softly. A nanny stepped inside. "The twins are ready, sir." McCrae nodded slowly and stood. When he walked into the living room of the penthouse, two small figures instantly turned toward him. 6-year-old Lucas. 6-year-old Lily. His twins. Their eyes lit up the moment they saw him. Lucas ran forward first, nearly slipping on the polished floor. McCrae knelt just in time as both children threw their arms around him. He hugged them tightly. Then Lucas pulled back and began moving his hands quickly. McCrae watched. He understood a little, but not enough. Lucas repeated the signs more slowly. McCrae hesitated, then awkwardly tried to respond. The children waited patiently. They were used to it. Their father loved them deeply, but he was still learning their world. Finally, Lily giggled and signed something to her brother. Lucas laughed. McCrae sighed. "What did she say?" he asked the nanny. The nanny smiled softly. "She said you're getting better, sir." McCrae looked down at his children again. "I will get better," he promised quietly. But inside, a familiar ache settled in his chest. Because the truth was harder than he ever admitted. McCrae had built an empire. Yet somehow, he still felt powerless when it came to his own children. Across the city, in a much smaller building, the morning looked very different. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Dishes clattered. Customers chatted. And behind the counter of a busy diner stood Mirabelle. Her hair was tied back loosely as she balanced 3 plates on one arm with practiced ease. "Table 6, the cook shouted. "Coming," Mirabelle called. She moved through the crowded diner with the smooth rhythm of someone who had done this for years. But unlike the other waitresses rushing around, Mirabelle always paused. Always noticed things others ignored. An elderly man struggling to open a milk carton. A tired mother calming a crying baby. A nervous teenager on a first date. Mirabelle smiled at each of them. Because she knew something most people didn't. Loneliness could exist even in crowded rooms. She placed the plates down gently. "Here you go." The couple at the table thanked her. As Mirabelle turned away, one of the new waitresses whispered beside her, "You're too nice." Mirabelle laughed lightly. "Is that a bad thing?" "No, but customers here don't notice that stuff." Mirabelle shrugged. "Maybe not." She picked up a coffee pot and began refilling cups. "But it still matters." The waitress shook her head and walked away. Mirabelle continued working quietly. What no one in the diner knew was why kindness mattered so much to her. Years ago, Mirabelle had spent most of her childhood sitting beside her younger brother in silent hospital rooms. Her brother, Matteo, had been deaf since birth. And for years, the world had ignored him. Teachers spoke without looking at him. Children laughed when he couldn't answer. Adults grew impatient. But Mirabelle had refused to let him disappear into silence. So she learned. She studied. She practiced. Sign language became her second voice. And for the first time in her brother's life, someone understood him. Even now, years later, Mirabelle still signs sometimes while thinking. A habit she never lost. She poured coffee for a customer. Then paused. Her fingers moved absent-mindedly. A silent word forming in the air. Good morning. That afternoon, miles away, McCrae sat inside the back seat of a sleek black car. Lucas and Lily sat beside him. The twins watched the city pass by through the window. They liked watching people. Movement was a language they understood. McCrae checked his watch. His assistant had suggested taking the twins out more often. Public interaction helps with development, she had said. So today he had canceled 3 meetings. Just to spend time with them. Hungry, he asked. The twins looked at him. Lucas tilted his head. Lily looked confused. McCrae sighed. Then he tried signing. Slowly. Awkwardly. Food. Lucas's face lit up instantly. Lily clapped happily. McCrae smiled. Good, he said. The car stopped in front of a restaurant downtown. It wasn't luxurious. Just a normal busy diner. McCrae chose it intentionally. He wanted his children to experience ordinary life. They stepped inside together. The restaurant was loud. Conversations overlapped. Plates clanged. The twins' eyes darted everywhere. People noticed McCrae immediately. Some whispered. Others stared. But no one noticed something else. The twins trying to communicate. Lucas pointed to the menu. Lily tried signing something to the passing waiter. The waiter looked confused. Then impatient. Sir, what will they have? He asked McCrae quickly. McCrae frowned slightly. They're deciding. But the waiter had already turned away. Lucas's small hands dropped slowly. Lily looked down at the table. Another server walked past. Ignored them. A customer nearby frowned at the children's movements. McCrae felt the familiar tightness in his chest again. This happened everywhere. Schools. Parks. Restaurants. People simply didn't know how to communicate. Or worse, didn't care enough to try. Lucas tapped the table gently, trying again to get someone's attention. But the room continued moving around them like they were invisible. McCrae clenched his jaw. For the first time in a long while, the billionaire CEO felt completely helpless. And across the room, a quiet waitress named Mirabelle had just finished serving table 8. As she turned toward the dining area, her eyes landed on something unusual. 2 small children. Signing. Her heart skipped. Because she understood every single word they were saying. And in just a few seconds, their worlds were about to collide. Before we continue, take a moment to think about this. Have you ever seen someone being ignored simply because others didn't understand them? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes the smallest act of understanding can change someone's entire world. The diner was loud. Forks scraped against plates. Coffee machines hissed. Conversations overlapped in waves of noise. But at table 12, the world felt strangely quiet. Lucas and Lily sat side by side, their small hands resting on the table. They had stopped trying to speak. McCrae noticed immediately. The twins weren't upset. They were simply used to it. That realization hurt more than anything. A waiter walked past again, carrying plates. Lucas raised his hand politely. The waiter didn't even look at him. McCrae inhaled slowly. He was a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. A man who could command boardrooms with a single sentence. Yet right now, he couldn't even get someone to listen to his children. Across the restaurant, Mirabelle watched the scene quietly. She had been refilling coffee cups when she noticed the twins' hands moving. At first, she thought she might be mistaken. But then Lily signed again. Clear. Precise. Beautiful. Mirabelle's heart tightened. Because she knew exactly what the little girl had just said. Lucas, maybe Daddy doesn't understand either. Mirabelle froze. For a moment she didn't move. The rest of the restaurant carried on around her. But her mind drifted back years ago, to a small hospital room where her little brother Mateo had once sat silently while adults spoke around him as if he wasn't there. That same quiet loneliness lived in the twins' eyes. Mirabel placed the coffee pot down. Her coworker called from behind the counter. "Table 9 needs ketchup." Mirabel nodded distractedly, but her attention remained on table 12. The twins tried again. Lucas picked up the menu and pointed to something. Then he signed slowly to Lily. "Do you think they will understand this time?" Lily hesitated. Then she signed back. "Maybe Daddy can help." McCrae noticed the exchange, but couldn't fully follow it. He hated that feeling, being left outside his own children's conversation. Finally he leaned forward. "What do you want?" he asked gently. Lucas tried signing again. McCrae attempted to copy the signs, but he got them wrong. The twins looked confused. Lucas tried again. McCrae shook his head apologetically. "I'm sorry." Lucas gave a small smile, pretending it didn't matter. But Lily's shoulders slumped slightly. That was the moment Mirabel couldn't watch anymore. She wiped her hands on her apron. Then she walked slowly toward table 12. McCrae noticed her approach but assumed she was just another server coming to take their order. He prepared himself to explain again. But Mirabel didn't look at him first. She looked directly at the twins. And then, she raised her hands. The movement was gentle, familiar, natural. Her fingers formed a simple sign. "Hello." Lucas froze. Lily blinked rapidly. For a full second, neither child moved. Then Lucas's eyes widened so much they nearly sparkled. Lily gasped silently. The twins turned toward each other in disbelief. Then back toward Mirabel. Mirabel smiled softly. And signed again. "My name is Mirabel." Lucas's hands shot up instantly. His movements were fast with excitement. "You understand us?" Mirabel laughed quietly. "Yes, I understand." Lily covered her mouth in amazement. Her eyes were already filling with tears. "No one understands us here," she signed quickly. Mirabel's expression softened. "I do." McCrae stared at the three of them in stunned silence. He had no idea what they were saying, but he understood something important had just happened. Because Lucas was grinning, Lily was laughing, and for the first time since they entered the restaurant, the twins looked alive again. McCrae leaned forward slightly. "Excuse me." Mirabel turned to him respectfully. "Yes, sir." McCrae hesitated. "Do you know sign language?" Mirabel nodded. "I do." McCrae looked back at his children who were now signing rapidly with her. They were practically bouncing in their seats. "What are they saying?" McCrae asked quietly. Mirabel glanced at the twins again. Then she smiled warmly. "They're asking if I can recommend the best dessert on the menu." McCrae blinked. "Dessert?" Mirabel nodded. Lucas signed something else quickly. Mirabel laughed again. "He says if you say no, he's going to negotiate." McCrae stared at his son in disbelief. Then he laughed softly for the first time that day. "That sounds like him." Lucas noticed his father laughing. He signed toward Mirabel. "Did Daddy say yes?" Mirabel translated. "Your father says we'll see." Lily groaned dramatically. Mirabel leaned closer and signed secretly. "I recommend the chocolate pancakes." Both twins gasped with delight. Mirabel turned to McCrae again. "They'd like the chocolate pancakes." McCrae shook his head with a smile. Of course they would. For a moment he simply watched the interaction. The twins were glowing. Their hands moved quickly as they asked Mirabel questions. She answered every single one patiently. And suddenly, McCrae felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Because for the first time since his children were born, someone outside their family truly understood them. The entire table felt different now. Warmer. Alive. But the moment that shook McCrae the most came next. Lily looked at Mirabel carefully. Then she signed something slowly. Mirabel's expression changed. Softened. McCrae noticed. "What did she say?" he asked quietly. Mirabel hesitated for just a second. Then she answered gently. She said. Mirabel looked back at Lily. Then continued. "She said this is the first time someone in a restaurant has talked to them." McCrae's chest tightened instantly. The noise of the diner faded again. He looked at his children. Lucas was watching Mirabelle with admiration. Lily looked hopeful. McCrae swallowed hard. For a man who controlled an empire, that small sentence felt like the loudest truth he had ever heard. Mirabelle noticed the emotion flicker across his face. So she signed one more sentence to the twins. You two are amazing. The world just hasn't learned how to listen yet. Lucas smiled proudly. Lily nodded confidently. And across the diner, customers had started to notice something unusual happening at table 12. People whispered. Some stared. But none of that mattered anymore. Because for the first time that day, the twins were no longer invisible. And McCrae was watching the woman who had changed everything with a single word. Hello. For the first time since entering the diner, the table felt warm. Alive. Lucas and Lily were laughing silently, their hands moving quickly as they spoke with Mirabelle. McCrae watched them carefully. It was a strange feeling. The twins were glowing in a way he rarely saw outside their home. Their faces were bright with excitement, their shoulders relaxed, their eyes full of life. All because someone finally understood them. Mirabelle stood beside the table with her notepad forgotten in her hand as the twins asked her endless questions. How long have you known sign language? Lucas signed quickly. Mirabelle responded just as fast. Since I was little. Lily leaned forward. Are you a teacher? Mirabelle smiled. No. Just a waitress. The twins looked surprised. Lucas tilted his head. Then why did you learn sign language? For a moment Mirabelle paused. The question stirred a quiet memory in her chest. She signed slowly. My brother is deaf. Lucas and Lily instantly brightened. Really? Mirabelle nodded. Yes. When we were kids, people ignored him a lot. So I learned to speak his language. Lily's expression softened. She understood that feeling too well. Across the table, McCrae observed the conversation silently. He couldn't follow the details, but he could read emotions. He saw the twins' joy. He saw Mirabelle's patience. And he felt something unfamiliar creeping into his thoughts. Gratitude. But along with it, something else. Discomfort. McCrae was a man used to control. In every room he entered, people adjusted themselves to him. But here at this simple diner table, he was the outsider. Mirabelle was the one holding the bridge between him and his children. That realization made him uneasy. The food arrived moments later. Chocolate pancakes stacked high with syrup and strawberries. Lucas and Lily clapped excitedly. Mirabelle signed playfully. Careful. They're hot. Lucas nodded seriously like a small gentleman. Thank you. McCrae watched the interaction carefully. Then he cleared his throat. Excuse me, Mirabelle? She turned toward him politely. Yes, sir. McCrae hesitated slightly. He wasn't used to asking for help. I appreciate what you did for my children. Mirabelle smiled softly. It was nothing. McCrae shook his head. No, it wasn't. He looked at the twins again. They don't get this often. Mirabelle followed his gaze. Lucas was carefully cutting his pancakes. Lily was explaining something animatedly with syrup on her fingers. Mirabelle chuckled quietly. They're wonderful kids. McCrae nodded slowly. Yes, they are. A brief silence settled between them. Then McCrae spoke again. You're very good with them. Mirabelle shrugged modestly. I just understand their language. But McCrae continued watching her thoughtfully. An idea flickered in his mind. I could hire you. Mirabelle blinked. I'm sorry. As a tutor, McCrae clarified. Or a communication coach. Someone who could help them. And maybe help me learn faster. Mirabelle was caught off guard. The offer sounded generous. But something about the way he said it made her hesitate. She glanced at the twins again before answering. That's kind of you, but I'm not looking for another job. McCrae frowned slightly. You wouldn't have to work here anymore. Mirabelle smiled gently. I like working here. McCrae looked around the noisy diner as if seeing it for the first time. You prefer this? Mirabelle didn't miss the subtle disbelief in his voice. Her smile faded just a little. Yes, she said calmly. The air between them shifted. McCrae hadn't meant to sound dismissive. But Mirabelle had spent years around people who assumed money could fix everything. She changed the subject quickly. Lucas tapped the table. Mirabelle, he signed excitedly. Look. He had stacked his pancakes into a tall tower. Mirabelle laughed. That's impressive. Lily leaned toward her. Will you come back tomorrow? The question was innocent, but it made Mirabelle pause. Before she could answer, McCrae spoke. My children shouldn't become dependent on strangers. The words came out sharper than he intended. The twins' smiles faded slightly. Mirabelle felt the shift instantly. She nodded politely. Of course. Lucas looked confused. Did we do something wrong? He signed to Mirabelle. Her heart softened. No, she signed gently. Your father is just busy. McCrae noticed the conversation, but didn't ask for translation this time. Something inside him had already begun pulling back. He reminded himself of something important. This was temporary. A random moment in a diner. Nothing more. He was McCrae. The billionaire. His life was structured, controlled, carefully managed. Getting emotionally involved with a waitress was unnecessary. Complicated. Across the table, Mirabelle felt the same resistance forming in her own heart. She had seen this before. Wealthy people who admired kindness from a distance, but never truly respected the person behind it. She had no desire to be another passing curiosity in someone else's story. So she stepped back slightly. Well, I should check on my other tables. Lucas's face fell immediately. Are you leaving? Mirabelle knelt slightly beside him. I'll be around, she signed. Just wave if you need anything. Lily nodded reluctantly. Thank you for talking to us. Mirabelle smiled warmly. Anytime. Then she stood and walked away. McCrae watched her go. Something about the way the twins' energy dimmed again unsettled him. Lucas poked his pancake tower quietly. Lily stared at her plate. McCrae suddenly felt the restaurant's noise return louder than before. He had just pushed away the one person who made his children feel understood. And for the first time in a long while, McCrae wondered if his pride had spoken too quickly. Across the diner, Mirabelle returned to the counter. Her co-worker leaned toward her curiously. What was that about? Mirabelle wiped her hands slowly. Nothing. But her eyes drifted back toward table 12, toward the two children now eating quietly, and toward the man who seemed powerful enough to control the world, yet still didn't know how to reach his own children. Moments like this happen more often than we realize. Sometimes pride, fear, or misunderstanding keeps people from accepting the help they truly need. What do you think McCrae should have done in that moment? Should he have trusted Mirabelle? Or was he right to keep his distance? Share your thoughts in the comments. The rain had started again by the time McCrae finished paying the bill. Outside the diner, the city lights shimmered against the wet pavement, turning the streets into glowing rivers of reflection. Lucas and Lily walked beside him, holding their small jackets close. But something was different. They were quieter. McCrae noticed it immediately. Normally after dessert, the twins would be excited, signing to each other about the food, the people they saw, the strange things children always found fascinating. Tonight, their hands rested still. McCrae opened the car door for them. They climbed inside without their usual playful energy. McCrae sat beside them as the driver started the engine. The silence in the car felt heavier than the rain outside. Finally Lucas turned toward him. His small hands moved slowly. McCrae watched carefully. He caught only a few words. Mirabelle come tomorrow? McCrae hesitated. He understood enough to know what Lucas was asking. The twins wanted to see her again. McCrae exhaled softly. I don't know, he admitted. Lucas looked disappointed. Lily glanced down at her lap. Their small fingers began signing to each other quietly. McCrae tried to follow but couldn't keep up. That familiar helpless feeling returned. He leaned back in the seat. The city passed by outside the window. For the first time, the evening replayed in his mind. The confusion when the waiter ignored the twins. The way Lucas's shoulders dropped. The moment Mirabelle signed hello. And the way his children had lit up like someone had finally turned the lights back on in their world. McCrae rubbed his temple. He hated admitting it. But Mirabelle had done something he hadn't been able to do yet. She had reached them instantly. Across town, Mirabelle finished wiping the last table of the night. The diner was nearly empty now. Only a few late customers remained. Her coworker stacked chairs nearby. "You were popular today," the waitress teased. Mirabelle raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The rich guy and his kids." Mirabelle sighed softly. "He was just a father trying to take his children out for dinner." Her coworker laughed. "That man arrived in a car worth more than this entire building." Mirabelle shrugged. "Money doesn't make parenting easier." She grabbed her coat and stepped outside. The rain had grown heavier. Mirabelle pulled the hood over her head and began walking toward the bus stop. But her mind kept drifting back to the twins. Lucas's curiosity, Lily's bright eyes, the way they had clung to every signed word like it was a gift. She smiled faintly to herself. They reminded her so much of Mateo when he was young. The same hunger to be understood. The same quiet resilience. Mirabelle reached the bus stop and sat down. Raindrops tapped against the metal shelter. She leaned back, staring at the dark sky. "Funny," she murmured softly. "Running into them today." At that exact moment, across the city, McCrae's car suddenly slowed, then stopped completely. The driver frowned. "That's strange." McCrae looked up. "What is it?" The driver glanced at the dashboard. "Engine warning light, sir." McCrae sighed. "Can we keep going?" The driver shook his head. "I'd rather not risk damaging the car." They had stopped only 2 blocks away from the diner. Rain poured harder against the windshield. McCrae checked his phone. No signal. "Perfect." Lucas tapped his shoulder. His small hands moved. "Problem?" McCrae nodded slightly. "Yes." Lily looked out the window. Then she pointed toward the street corner. McCrae followed her finger. There, under a bus shelter illuminated by a flickering streetlight, sat Mirabelle. Lucas gasped with excitement. He immediately began signing to his sister. McCrae noticed their sudden energy. "What is it?" Lucas pointed eagerly. McCrae turned again. And there she was. Mirabelle looked up at the sound of the car door opening. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw McCrae stepping out into the rain. "Mr. McCrae?" McCrae gave a slightly embarrassed smile. "Seems my car decided to take a break." Mirabelle laughed softly. "That happens." Lucas and Lily had already jumped out of the car. They ran toward her excitedly. Mirabelle knelt down just in time as they began signing rapidly. "You're here. We thought you left. Daddy's car broke." Mirabelle laughed again as she tried to keep up. "Slow down." The twins were glowing again. McCrae stood nearby, watching the scene unfold. The rain continued falling steadily around them. Mirabelle looked up at him. "Are you waiting for a tow truck?" McCrae nodded. "Apparently." Mirabelle glanced at the diner down the street. "You could come inside until it arrives." McCrae hesitated. He wasn't used to being the one inconvenienced. But Lucas tugged his sleeve. His small hands signed eagerly. "Please." Lily nodded enthusiastically. McCrae looked between them and Mirabelle. Then he sighed. "All right." A few minutes later, they were back inside the warm diner. The night shift cook waved lazily from the kitchen. Mirabelle brought hot chocolate for the twins. Lucas and Lily beamed. They began signing with her again instantly. McCrae sat across from them, quietly observing. This time he didn't interrupt. He simply watched, listened, studied the rhythm of their conversation. Mirabelle noticed him watching and slowed her signs slightly so he could follow. Lucas pointed at his father. "He's learning," he told her proudly. Mirabelle smiled. "That's good." McCrae cleared his throat. "What did he say?" Mirabelle looked at him kindly. "He said you're trying." McCrae looked down at the table for a moment. Then he looked back at his children. "Of course I am." Lucas smiled proudly. And for the first time that night, McCrae didn't feel like an outsider anymore. The broken car had done something unexpected. It had forced their worlds to collide again. And somewhere in that quiet diner, a new connection was beginning to form. Slowly, carefully, but undeniably. The diner was quieter now. Most of the lights had dimmed, leaving only the warm glow above a few tables. Outside, the rain continued to fall steadily. tapping softly against the windows like a patient reminder that the night was far from over. Lucas and Lily sat happily across from Mirabelle, their small hands dancing through the air as they continued signing with excitement. McCrae watched them carefully. For the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't expected tonight. Peace. Lucas was explaining something animatedly about school, using wide gestures that made Lily giggle. Mirabelle nodded patiently. That sounds exciting, she signed. But did you finish your homework? Lucas froze. Lily burst into silent laughter. McCrae raised an eyebrow. What did she say? Mirabelle smiled slightly. I asked about homework. McCrae chuckled softly. Ah, now that explains his reaction. Lucas crossed his arms dramatically, pretending to be offended. Mirabelle leaned closer and signed playfully. Homework is important if you want to grow up smart like your father. Lucas glanced at McCrae thoughtfully. Then he signed something unexpected. Mirabelle's hands paused midair. Her expression changed. McCrae noticed instantly. What did he say? Mirabelle hesitated for a moment. Then she answered gently. He said, he wants to be someone people listen to. McCrae felt the words settle heavily in his chest. Lucas looked down at his hot chocolate. His fingers slowly traced the edge of the mug. Mirabelle continued translating softly. He said people don't listen to them, because they can't hear. Silence settled over the table. The rain outside seemed louder now. McCrae looked at his son, at the quiet determination in the boy's small face. And suddenly, the empire he had built felt very small compared to the challenge his children faced every day. Mirabelle noticed the emotion flicker in his expression. So she gently changed the tone. But people will listen someday, she signed to Lucas. You just have to keep speaking. Lucas looked up again. Even if they don't understand? Mirabelle nodded firmly. Especially then. Lily smiled at that answer. McCrae leaned back slightly, studying Mirabelle more carefully now. You seem to understand them very well. Mirabelle shrugged lightly. I've had a lot of practice. McCrae folded his hands together. You mentioned earlier that your brother is deaf. Mirabelle's smile faded slightly. Yes. There was something in her voice that made McCrae pause. Is he nearby? McCrae asked. Mirabelle looked down at the table. Her fingers moved slowly across the wood surface. He passed away. The words hung quietly in the air. Lucas and Lily stopped signing. They both looked at her. Mirabelle took a small breath before continuing. He was 10. The diner felt even quieter now. McCrae spoke carefully. What happened? Mirabelle looked toward the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. For years people treated him like he was invisible, she said softly. Teachers didn't know how to teach him. Kids made fun of him because he signed instead of talking. Lucas and Lily watched her closely. Mirabelle's voice remained calm, but her eyes carried old pain. He used to come home frustrated every day, she continued. He'd sit in our room and sign things like, "Why doesn't anyone understand me?" She paused briefly. I started learning sign language just so he wouldn't feel alone. Lucas reached across the table and gently touched her sleeve. Mirabelle smiled at him gratefully. But when Mateo was 10, she continued quietly, he got sick. McCrae leaned forward slightly. The hospital staff didn't know sign language either. Her words were steady, but the emotion underneath them was unmistakable. They kept talking over him, talking about him, talking around him. Mirabelle swallowed. He couldn't ask questions. He couldn't tell them how he felt. Lucas's hands slowly tightened into small fists. Mirabelle noticed and gently signed to him. It's okay. Then she looked back at McCrae. He passed away before anyone ever really understood him. The rain continued tapping softly against the windows. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally McCrae said quietly, I'm sorry. Mirabelle nodded. After that, I promised myself something. What was that? Her eyes shifted toward Lucas and Lily. I promised that if I ever saw someone being ignored because of silence, I would speak their language. Lucas smiled slowly. Lily leaned forward and hugged Mirabelle suddenly. Mirabelle froze for a moment before gently hugging her back. McCrae watched the moment carefully, and something shifted inside him. Because this woman hadn't helped his children for money, or recognition, or obligation. She had done it because she understood their pain. McCrae leaned forward. Mirabelle. She looked up. Yes. I owe you an apology. Mirabelle blinked slightly. For what? For earlier, he admitted. When I assumed I could simply hire you. Mirabelle studied him carefully. McCrae continued. I've spent most of my life solving problems with resources. But this, he gestured toward the twins, this isn't something money fixes. Mirabelle smiled gently. No. It isn't. Lucas signed something quickly. Mirabelle laughed softly. What did he say? McCrae asked. He said you're finally learning. McCrae shook his head with a quiet smile. Yes. I suppose I am. Just then McCrae's phone buzzed. The driver stepped inside moments later. The car is fixed, sir. McCrae nodded. But Lucas and Lily instantly looked disappointed. They signed quickly to Mirabelle. Will we see you again? Mirabelle hesitated. Before she could answer, McCrae spoke. I would like that. Mirabelle looked at him, surprised. McCrae continued carefully. Not as an employee. He glanced at his children. But perhaps as a friend. Mirabelle looked at Lucas and Lily again. Their hopeful faces made the answer easy. I'd like that too. Outside, the rain finally began to slow. But inside the diner, something much deeper had begun to grow. A connection built not from wealth or obligation, but from understanding. The rain had finally stopped when McCrae's car pulled away from the diner that night. But the quiet warmth of that evening stayed with all of them. Lucas and Lily couldn't stop talking, signing excitedly to each other in the back seat. McCrae watched them through the rearview mirror. They were happier than he had seen them in weeks. Lucas signed quickly. Do you think Mirabelle will really see us again? Lily nodded confidently. She promised. McCrae leaned back in his seat thinking. A waitress had changed the entire mood of his children in a single evening. That fact lingered in his mind long after they arrived home. Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. McCrae found himself thinking about Mirabelle often. Not just because of the twins, but because of the way she spoke. The way she listened. The quiet strength behind her kindness. Meanwhile, Lucas and Lily talked about her constantly. At breakfast. During homework. Even before bedtime. Mirabelle signs faster than our teacher. Lucas told his sister one afternoon. She's funnier too, Lily added. McCrae overheard them from the doorway of the living room. He smiled faintly. Then he made a decision. 3 days later, a familiar black car parked outside the small diner. Mirabelle was wiping down a table when the bell above the door rang. She looked up. And there they were. Lucas and Lily rushed in first. Mirabelle. Their hands moved excitedly as they ran toward her. Mirabelle laughed and knelt down to greet them. Well, hello again. Lily hugged her immediately. Lucas signed quickly. We came back. Mirabelle glanced behind them and saw McCrae walking in. He looked slightly awkward standing in such a simple place again. But there was a softness in his expression this time. I hope we're not interrupting your work, he said. Mirabelle shook her head. It's my break. Lucas pulled her toward a booth eagerly. Come sit. Mirabelle laughed. You two are very persuasive. McCrae sat across from them again. This time the atmosphere felt different. More comfortable. More natural. Lucas immediately began telling Mirabelle about his school project. We're building a volcano, he signed dramatically. Mirabelle raised her eyebrows. Does it explode? Lucas nodded proudly. Of course. Lily signed something mischievous. Mirabelle burst out laughing. McCrae looked curious. What did she say? Mirabelle tried to hide her smile. She said Lucas tested it in the kitchen and almost exploded the microwave. McCrae looked at his son. Lucas avoided eye contact. McCrae crossed his arms. Lucas. Lucas sighed dramatically. Lily giggled again. Mirabelle leaned closer and signed teasingly. I think you're in trouble. Lucas shook his head quickly. No. Daddy likes science. McCrae shook his head but couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in a long while, family conversation flowed easily around him. And for once, he wasn't struggling to keep up. Mirabelle made sure to slow her signs occasionally, so he could understand. Lucas even started teaching him new signs. This one means friend, Lucas explained proudly. McCrae practiced the movement. Mirabelle nodded approvingly. Very good. McCrae looked slightly amused. I feel like a student. You are, Mirabelle replied gently. They continued talking. Hours seemed to pass without anyone noticing. Eventually the diner began getting busy again. Mirabelle stood reluctantly. I should get back to work. Lily's face fell. Already? Mirabelle nodded. But I'll see you again. McCrae hesitated for a moment. Then he spoke. Would you like to join us at the park tomorrow? Mirabelle blinked in surprise. The park? Lucas and Lily immediately lit up. Yes. McCrae looked slightly embarrassed. They've been asking to practice signing outdoors. Mirabelle smiled. That sounds nice. The next afternoon, sunlight replaced the rain that had filled the previous night. The park was alive with laughter, children playing, and birds flying between tall trees. Lucas and Lily ran ahead toward the swings. Mirabelle followed them, laughing. McCrae walked beside her slowly. You didn't have to take time off for this, he said. Mirabelle shrugged lightly. Sometimes the best conversations don't happen indoors. Lucas called for them excitedly. They spent the afternoon together. Lucas challenged Mirabelle to a race. Lily showed her favorite hiding spot behind a giant oak tree. Mirabelle signed stories about her brother Mateo. The twins listened with fascination. McCrae watched everything quietly. There was something peaceful about seeing his children so comfortable, so open. At one point Lily climbed onto the swing beside Mirabelle. She signed something softly. Mirabelle nodded thoughtfully. McCrae noticed and walked over. What did she say? Mirabelle looked at Lily gently, then answered. She said she wishes every day could be like today. McCrae felt his chest tighten slightly. He looked at the twins playing together. For years he had given them everything. The best schools, the best therapists, the best care money could provide. But maybe what they needed most was simply someone who understood them. And somehow, Mirabelle had become that person. Later that evening, the sun began setting behind the trees. Lucas and Lily sat in the grass, tired but happy. Mirabelle watched them fondly. McCrae stood beside her quietly. You're good for them, he said softly. Mirabelle looked at the children too. They're good for me too. McCrae studied her face for a moment. You know, he said thoughtfully, this is the happiest I've seen them in a long time. Mirabelle smiled faintly. They just needed someone to listen. McCrae nodded slowly. But in his heart, he was beginning to realize something even deeper. Mirabelle wasn't just helping his children heal. She was slowly helping him heal too. And neither of them had noticed yet that their hearts were already beginning to move closer together. The afternoon sun faded slowly as the park grew quieter. Lucas and Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat of McCrae's car on the way home, their small heads leaning gently against each other. Mirabelle sat in the front passenger seat while the driver moved smoothly through the evening traffic. The car was quiet, comfortably quiet. McCrae glanced toward Mirabelle. You're good with them, he said again. Mirabelle smiled faintly. They're easy to love. McCrae didn't answer immediately. The words lingered in the space between them. Outside, the city lights flickered on as dusk settled over the streets. Finally Mirabelle spoke. You've done a lot for them. McCrae raised an eyebrow slightly. Have I? Mirabelle nodded. They're kind, curious, confident. That usually comes from a parent who cares. McCrae looked ahead through the windshield. For years I worried I was failing them. Mirabelle turned slightly toward him. Why? McCrae hesitated. Then he spoke quietly. Because I don't always understand their world. Mirabelle's voice softened. But you're trying. McCrae nodded slowly. I am. The car stopped in front of the diner. Mirabelle reached for the door handle. Thank you for today. McCrae looked at her. Thank you for coming. She stepped out, and the door closed gently behind her. McCrae watched her walk toward the diner entrance before the driver pulled away. Neither of them noticed the dark sedan parked across the street. Inside that car, a man lowered a camera. Click, click, click. The next morning, McCrae walked into his office at the top of the glass tower that carried his company's name. His assistant approached him immediately. "You should see this." She handed him a tablet. McCrae frowned slightly as he read the headline. Billionaire CEO secretly dating diner waitress? Below it were several photos. McCrae and Mirabelle sitting together in the diner. Mirabelle laughing with the twins. The park. The swings. Lucas hugging Mirabelle. McCrae's jaw tightened. The article continued with speculation. Rumors. Assumptions. Sources say the mysterious waitress may have caught the attention of the wealthy CEO. McCrae closed the tablet slowly. His assistant looked uneasy. The board members have already called twice. McCrae leaned against his desk. This wasn't new. The media loved turning his personal life into entertainment. But this time, it felt different. Because Mirabelle had never asked for any of this. Across town, Mirabelle stepped into the diner just as her co-worker rushed toward her. Mirabelle. She looked confused. "What's wrong?" The waitress held up her phone. "You're trending." Mirabelle blinked. "What?" Her co-worker showed her the article. Mirabelle read the headline. Her stomach dropped. Customers in the diner had already started whispering. One of them pointed. Another took a photo. Mirabelle placed the phone down slowly. "This is ridiculous," she murmured. But the damage had already begun. Later that afternoon, a black car pulled up outside the diner again. Lucas and Lily ran inside happily. "Mirabelle." They signed excitedly. But Mirabelle didn't smile the way she usually did. McCrae noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked. Mirabelle glanced toward the window where two strangers stood taking photos. Then she looked back at him. "You saw the article?" McCrae nodded. "Yes." Lucas and Lily looked between them, confused by the tension. Mirabelle sighed quietly. "This is exactly why I didn't want to get involved." McCrae frowned. "Involved? With your world," she said. McCrae crossed his arms slightly. "This isn't my fault." Mirabelle looked at him carefully. "I know that." "Then what's the problem?" Mirabelle gestured toward the people watching them. "The problem is that your life comes with attention. Cameras. Rumors." Lucas tugged her sleeve. "What's happening?" he signed. Mirabelle knelt beside him. "Nothing, sweetheart." But Lucas could feel the tension. McCrae spoke again. "I can make the media stop." Mirabelle shook her head. "You can't control everything." McCrae's voice hardened slightly. "I control more than you think." Mirabelle stood slowly. "That's the problem, McCrae." The twins looked between them anxiously. Mirabelle continued quietly. "You're used to fixing everything with power." "And what's wrong with that?" McCrae asked. Mirabelle's voice trembled slightly. "Because people like me don't live in that world." McCrae felt irritation rising. "You think I look down on you?" Mirabelle didn't answer. Her silence said enough. McCrae shook his head. "That's not true." "But it feels true," Mirabelle replied softly. The words hung painfully in the air. Lucas stepped between them suddenly. "Please stop," he signed. Mirabelle's heart broke. McCrae noticed the twins' frightened expressions. But pride had already begun building inside him. "You're overreacting," he said. Mirabelle's eyes filled slightly. "Maybe." She grabbed her bag. "But I can't be part of something that turns my life into a headline." Lucas grabbed her hand desperately. "Don't go." Mirabelle knelt and hugged him tightly. "You are two of the most amazing kids I've ever met." Lily hugged her too. Tears slipped down Mirabelle's cheeks now. McCrae watched silently. Something inside him wanted to stop her. But the words wouldn't come. Mirabelle stood up slowly. She looked at McCrae one last time. "You're a good father," she said quietly. "But our worlds are too different." Then she turned and walked out of the diner. Lucas stared at the door in shock. Lily's lip trembled. McCrae stood frozen in place. For the first time since meeting Mirabelle, the warmth she had brought into their lives disappeared. And the silence returned. But this time, it hurt far more than before. Lucas signed something slowly to his father. McCrae looked down. "Why didn't you stop her?" McCrae had no answer. And for the first time, the most powerful man in the city realized he might have just lost something far more valuable than his pride. The diner door closed behind Mirabelle with a soft chime. But the sound echoed in McCrae's chest like something much heavier. For several seconds, no one moved. Lucas still stood near the booth, staring at the door where Mirabelle had disappeared. Lily slowly slid into the seat beside him. The warmth that had filled the diner during the past weeks was gone, replaced by something cold, something empty. McCrae sat down slowly across from them. Lucas turned toward him. His hands moved slowly. Why didn't you stop her? The question landed harder than anything the reporters or headlines could have said. McCrae opened his mouth, but no words came out. Lily signed next. She thinks we don't want her. McCrae immediately shook his head. That's not true. But the twins weren't watching his lips. They were watching his actions. Lucas lowered his hands and looked down at the table. The same quiet sadness from the very first day in the diner had returned. McCrae felt it deeply. He had spent his entire life believing that strength meant standing firm, not bending, not chasing. But right now, that belief suddenly felt very wrong. That night, the penthouse felt unusually quiet. Lucas and Lily sat in the living room, their homework untouched. McCrae stood near the large window overlooking the glowing city skyline. The headlines had already spread further. His assistant had called twice. The board wanted a statement. Public relations teams wanted damage control. But none of it mattered right now. McCrae turned toward his children. Lucas was signing something softly to Lily. McCrae focused carefully. He understood enough now to follow the conversation. Maybe Mirabelle won't come back. Lily looked down sadly. People always leave. McCrae's chest tightened. He walked slowly toward them. No, he said gently. Lucas looked up. McCrae took a breath. She didn't leave because of you. Lucas signed again. Then why? McCrae hesitated. Then he said the hardest words he had spoken in years. Because of me. The twins watched him carefully. McCrae sat beside them. I let my pride get in the way. Lucas tilted his head. McCrae continued slowly. Mirabelle was afraid of my world. The attention. The headlines. Lily nodded slightly. She understood that. Lucas signed again. But you like her. McCrae froze. Children always had a way of seeing the truth faster than adults. He exhaled softly. Yes. Lily smiled faintly. She likes you too. McCrae gave a small laugh. You think so? Lucas nodded confidently. She stayed for us. Lily added another sign. But she looked at you a lot. McCrae couldn't help smiling slightly. But then the seriousness returned. Sometimes when we care about someone, he said quietly, we have to fight for them. Lucas signed slowly. Like superheroes? McCrae chuckled softly. Something like that. Lily squeezed his hand. Then go bring her back. The simplicity of the solution made McCrae laugh again. But something inside him shifted. Because maybe the twins were right. Maybe love wasn't about control. Or pride. Or power. Maybe it was about courage. Across the city, Mirabelle sat on the small couch in her apartment. The television was on, but she wasn't watching it. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications. More articles. More rumors. She turned the phone face down. Her apartment felt unusually quiet tonight. Too quiet. Mirabelle leaned back and stared at the ceiling. She tried to convince herself she had done the right thing. McCrae's world was too big. Too complicated. Too public. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lucas and Lily's faces. Their excitement. Their hugs. The way they signed friend. Her chest tightened painfully. Why does this hurt so much? She whispered. Because deep down, she knew the truth. It wasn't just the twins she missed. It was their father too. Back at the penthouse, McCrae was already putting on his coat. Lucas and Lily stood near the door watching him. You two should go to bed, he told them gently. Lucas crossed his arms. We're waiting. McCrae raised an eyebrow. For what? Lily signed confidently. For Mirabelle. McCrae shook his head with a soft laugh. You're very confident. Lucas nodded. So are you. McCrae paused. Then he crouched down in front of them. I'm going to talk to her. Lucas smiled. Good. Lily hugged him quickly. Tell her we miss her. McCrae hugged them both. I will. Then he stood and walked out the door. The city streets were quieter now as McCrae's car drove through the night. But inside his chest, his heart was racing. He wasn't nervous about business deals or boardroom battles. But this was different. This required vulnerability. The driver stopped outside Mirabelle's apartment building. McCrae stepped out. For a moment, he simply stood there staring up at the window where a faint light glowed. He could turn back, return to his safe, controlled world, pretend none of this had mattered. But Lucas's words echoed in his mind, like superheroes. McCrae walked toward the entrance. For the first time in years, the billionaire CEO wasn't acting out of power. He was acting out of love. And the next conversation would decide everything. The apartment door clicked softly as McCrae knocked gently. Mirabelle's heart skipped a beat as she heard the sound. She hadn't expected him to come. Not so soon. Not so determined. She stared at the door for a long moment before slowly opening it. McCrae stood there, the city lights behind him casting a soft glow. He looked different somehow. Not the commanding CEO who could move empires with a word, but a man standing vulnerably in front of someone he cared about deeply. Mirabelle, he began quietly. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I know I've been difficult, he continued. Mirabelle crossed her arms, trying to keep her composure. You mean controlling, she replied softly. McCrae exhaled. Yes, controlling. But tonight I realized, the only thing I want to control is myself. So I don't lose you, or my children again. Her eyes softened. McCrae stepped closer, his hands open, vulnerable. I can't promise perfection. I can't promise the world won't try to tear this apart. But I can promise you this. I will try every day to understand, to listen, and to be here. With you. With them. Mirabelle's chest tightened. She looked past him, toward the small glow of the city skyline, and then back at him. You're serious? More serious than any deal I've ever signed, he replied. Mirabelle felt her defenses slipping. Her heart remembered the warmth she felt when Lucas and Lily laughed, the connection she had shared with them, the fragile yet undeniable bond forming with McCrae. Slowly she nodded. I believe you. Lucas and Lily ran into the apartment from the living room, sensing the change in the air. Daddy. Lucas signed excitedly. Mirabelle. Lily added, her small hands reaching out. Mirabelle knelt to embrace them both. You two are the bravest little people I've ever met, she signed, her hands trembling slightly with emotion. McCrae watched, feeling a mixture of awe and love. Then Lucas turned to him, signing rapidly. We want you to stay, please. McCrae knelt beside them. I'm not going anywhere, he signed back slowly, carefully, feeling each movement carry the weight of his promise. Mirabelle looked up at him, her eyes glistening. For real this time? For real, he whispered. The city outside continued to shine, but inside that small apartment, the world felt complete. No cameras. No headlines. No power plays. Just understanding, trust, and love. Mirabelle smiled, finally allowing herself to let go of fear. Then let's try this together, she signed. McCrae nodded, his hand reaching gently to hers. The twins cheered silently, their joy uncontainable, and McCrae smiled. For the first time in years he felt truly whole. They had found something unexpected, something rare, love at last. A love built not on wealth, not on status, but on patience, courage, and the willingness to see each other's hearts. Mirabelle leaned closer, signing softly to Lucas and Lily. You two did this. You brought us together. Lucas beamed. We did good, he signed. McCrae chuckled quietly. Yes, you did very, very good. They sat together on the small couch, the evening stretching ahead like a promise. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Inside, a new family had found its rhythm. And for once, everyone, big and small, felt truly heard. Sometimes love doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes quietly, through patience, understanding, and moments of courage. Have you ever experienced a love that surprised you when you least expected it? Share your story in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. Your time, your support, and your presence here mean more than words can say. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or kept you watching, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong, and keep believing in love. See you in the next story.